no time to waste. I've got that lightning inside me. This is how legends are made. This is how legends are made.
Limitless was a bestseller. So I know that's going to be replicated. So LGO, thanks for joining us. Jason Van Camp, he's a West Point grad, played football at Army. He's a decorated Green Beret. He is a best-selling author of Deliberate Discomfort, and he runs Warrior Rising and Mission 60. And again, is a board member of the Outlier Project. So Jason, thanks for joining us. And last but certainly not least, pinch hitting for Claude Silver, which we were super blessed, is April. April's an Air Force veteran. She's the author of one of my favorite books. If you have not read Magic Blue Rocks, you have got to read this book. Literally, she sent me, I forgot what they call it, the galleys or whatever it is. It's before it's published. And I sat down and read the entire thing in one sitting. It's that good. She's the founder of Driven Outcomes, and she is a kick-ass keynote speaker. So we are super blessed to be joined by them. And maybe best of all, we've got probably the best moderator out there to run the show today, Rachel Drunkenbiller. She's a keynote speaker. We have had lots of requests for her to sing because she is a singing keynote speaker. She's the founder of Unmuted. She specializes in leadership training. She's a course instructor for Simon Sinek. And today she's going to be leading us through a discussion about leadership through uncertainty. And we certainly have that, whether it's COVID, whether it's the economy, or whether it's just fear. We have a lot of uncertainty out there. So I think it's a really great topic for us to dive into. So anyway, thank you all for joining us. And I'm going to throw it over to Rachel to get things started.
All right, thanks so much, Scott. And so excited to be here with all of you. I want to give a shout out to Eric Silverman too, who first connected me to you, Scott. And he is like the ultimate connector and just supporter of all the humans. And if anyone's interacted with him, you know that about Eric. He's just somebody who supports and shows up for people in a powerful way. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to have the opportunity to learn from these incredible thought leaders and panelists. And because I believe in the power of activating the collective wisdom of a group of people, all of you have insights to share as well. And so there's going to be times during the experience today where we're going to invite your voices to come in through a tool called Mentimeter, and links will be dropped into the chat. And so when you see those links get dropped in the chat, that'll be your cue to say, oh, okay, I'm going to click on that link. It'll open up a new browser window, ask you a quick question. As soon as you answer the question, you can just come back to the Zoom screen, and then we'll do something really cool and aggregate all those and share that with you after the session as well. So the more each of you participate and contribute, the more the collective benefits. So that's what we're going to do today. So to get started, kind of talking about this topic of, we're trying to figure out what do we want to talk about, leading well through uncertainty. And as someone who kind of literally got hit by a truck while I was running at the start of the pandemic and fractured my back, I've had what all of us have had, which are those I didn't see it coming moments. Right? All of us have had these moments where anybody felt like you got hit by a truck in the past 2.5 years? So like it kind of hit you and then it like backed up and you start to hobble up and then it hits you again and you try to get up again and it just hits you again and you're like, I'm done. I mean, it's been exhausting to be a human over the past 2.5 years. And so we thought it would be really awesome to bring this group of people together to talk through that, to share their experiences, their lessons learned, to give you the opportunity to reflect on that yourself so that we can all learn from each other. So to get started, we're going to ask for your insights on who you've been learning from lately before we go to our first question, and Jason's going to kick us off with that. But first and foremost, we just want to invite you to reflect on, are there any podcasts you listen to, great books that you've read and been inspired by, or any people that you've been inspired by that you'd recommend other people follow or check out? Feel free. There's a link that's in the chat that Kathy has dropped into the chat. If you click on that link, we'll be able to gather all your responses in one spot and then send this out to you afterwards. So you'll have a whole new list of new books that you can read, podcasts you can listen to, leaders you can follow. And to get started, I'm just curious if either Jason, LGO, or April, if you want to chime in with anything you've been reading, maybe one or two things you've been either reading or listening to lately that's been inspiring you as everybody else is sharing their responses to this.
Sure, I'll start, I guess. I like the classics, so I have a bookshelf behind me, and I kind of put all the books that have really made an impact in my life behind there. And the ones that are on a certain shelf, The Catcher in the Rye, I read at a very young age. Jack Kerouac, Catch Me If You Can, at a very young age, Impact me. Frank W. Abagnale, I got a chance to meet him later in life and actually keynote with him, which was an awesome experience. A book that I read recently that I really, really enjoyed was The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F. I'm not going to say, unless you want me to, which I will. As far as shows, I've been watching this Netflix show called Untold, and I saw the Untold documentary of Manti Te'o recently. He was a linebacker at Notre Dame, and he was one of the first guys to get publicly catfished, and everybody berated him. They mean to this guy, they're questioning his sexuality, and the documentary was so well done and it was so enlightening. I was like, man, I feel like I want to call up Manti Te'o right now and just apologize to him for ever thinking negatively about him, because he got screwed. This guy got, it was a tough deal. And then they have Malice at the Arena or something about the Indiana Pacers. They had that Malice at the Palace is what it's called. Another untold story. So I'll leave it at that.
Great. Those are awesome. And while you're sharing those, Jason, I dropped some of them into the Mentimeter. And so I want to show folks just what is coming up in here so that they can see. And then I'd love either April or LGO feel free to share your responses. So this is what we've got coming in. We've got Jordan Peterson, David Goggins, Obstacles Away, also a huge Ryan Holiday fan. On Purpose, Jay Shetty, Power of Regret, one of the best books, Dan Pink. So good. Adam Grant. So we're going to send all of these to you. Lewis Howes, book recommendations. See how much wisdom is in a group of people. You just ask the right question and you're like, unlocked. All this brilliance in a room of people that are aspirational and doing big things. So Jason, thanks for kicking us off. LG or April, anything you want to add? Just maybe one or two things that you're either reading or listening to that have been inspiring you?
Yeah, I mean, I as Scott will tell you, I've been reading my own book like 400 times in the last 2 months, trying to get it done. So I'm so not in the personal development space right now because I'm so sick of it from reading my own. But I am in the figure out how to control your life and what's a good life and why are we all here kind of phase. So I've been spending a lot of time listening to Jonathan Field's Good Life Project podcast. He interviews incredible athletes, celebrities, thinkers, authors about what it means to live a good life. And then there's 4 books that I are sort of sticking out at me in this space. One is Carrie Lorenz, Span of Control. Carrie Lorenz was the first female F-14 fighter pilot in the US Navy, and she talks about what is in your span of control and what is not. Richie Norton's got a new book that's coming out. I just read the advanced reader copy to blurb it. It's called Anti-Time Management, and it's all about how you fill your calendar with the stuff that is actually meaningful to you, and you let all the rest of the garbage find its way in on its own. So it's cool. It's going to find its way in. I just interviewed Andrew McConnell, Get Out of My Head, on my podcast. And he takes basically all of the wisdom from the Stoics like Ryan Holiday does, but he actually applies it to entrepreneurship. So for the entrepreneurs on this call who love Ryan Holiday, here's a way to take Ryan Holiday's thinking and understanding of the Stoics and bring it into your current life. So that's pretty much what I've been thinking about and reading these days.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. I dropped those into the Mentimeter too as you were sharing them. April, anything you want to chime in with before we get to our next question?
So I'm old school with my podcast. One of my favorites is How I Built This by Guy Raz, because you get to hear those things that the folks that you really look up to who've built amazing things went through and did that never seem to make the interviews, the blogs, or the books. So I love that. And my all-time favorite book is The Go-Giver by Bob Burg. And anyone who hasn't read it, I feel like that one's a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that. And that was mentioned several times actually too in this list. So you're in good company of people that appreciate his work. So thanks for chiming in on that. And again, we'll send all those responses to you all afterwards so that you have them to look back on as inspiration or to add to your reading list. So what we want to do now is want to just like connect to a sense of purpose, because whenever we come together as a community of people, it's really important to get back to, why are we here? What are we learning? What matters right now? And so Jason, I want to invite you to kick us off with your response to this of what's something you're learning about yourself as a leader right now? So a way you could think about this. And by the way, as I'm asking this question, I invite each of you to think about this yourself, grab a pen and paper and even jot this down for yourself. As you reflect maybe even over the past 2 years, what's a way you've adapted personally or professionally that's made you proud, or just what's something you're learning about yourself that you appreciate?
That's a great question. The secret, I think, to success is knowing yourself, knowing who you are. And the quicker you can find out who you are, you can turn the volume up and you can really succeed. And I've known for the majority of my life that I've been a pretty patient person. But I've always been blessed with patience. Like my grandfather had incredible patience. He wouldn't let my grandmother drive. It was a different era back then. So he drove her to the mall and to shopping, and he would just sit in the car for hours and just wait for her. And I think I learned that from my family, just this patience. And I think when you have patience, there's a certain lack of emotion as well. So for me, what I've done in the last 2 years is become less patient, becoming more of an aggressor, so to speak, like to go after it, to show my emotions more, to let people know that I'm not okay with waiting around. I want to move forward, instead of cultivating and nurturing and doing those things, which are great, but it doesn't always work for every single person. Like you have to identify people that listen. I've done everything we possibly can with this person. They're just not a good fit here. We need to move on. I'm going to be less patient with this person. I'm going to tell them they're not a good fit. They need to go somewhere else. They're no longer going to work for this company or this supporter, this donor, somebody like that. You're not doing anything for us. We don't need this type of assistance. We need some other things. We're going to move on and go in a different direction. So I think what I've learned in the last 2 years is it's okay to be impatient a little bit, and it will help you achieve your goals faster. Now, I always tell my team, don't rush to failure. You don't want to rush so fast that you're leaving everything behind and you're creating carnage and wreckage behind you. But for me, I need to move a little faster. I need to be a little less patient. So that's what I've learned about myself as a leader.
Appreciate that. Yeah, it's like I'm hearing a sense of urgency. Maybe it's like a way of framing it, right? It's like you're having a sense of urgency around I'm clearer on what I'm doing and where I'm going and what matters, and I'm going to be more laser focused and less apologetic about how I approach that. That's kind of what I'm hearing and what you're saying. Thanks for sharing that. Either April or LGO, feel free to chime in. What have you learned about yourself? Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to jump in next because mine really dovetails well with that. Over the course of 2021, I got very sick. Like if you would have asked me to bet money on whether or not I'd still be sitting here today in March of last year, I wouldn't have taken that bet. Like sick. And I'm fine now. But what I realized during that time was that life is really fucking short. And I have the same thing. It's the impatience, not the rush to failure, as Jason said, but I've learned over the course of the last couple of years to really embrace my ambition. And if there's something big that I want to go after, I'm no longer apologizing for it. And I'm also sitting comfortably with the super uncomfortable feelings of uncertainty and doubt and anxiety and stress, and knowing that that's just part and parcel of getting from where we are today, which is comfortable and known, to where we haven't yet been, which is super uncomfortable and unknown, but really exciting. And so I'm all about embracing that ambition and being impatient as hell going after it.
Yeah. All right. Yes, I'm with you on that. And sitting with the uncomfortable emotions, which I think is something that a lot of us would rather move on from. It's like, okay, I just want to get to the thing that feels good as quickly as I possibly can. And we miss out on the learning that can happen when we sit with the discomfort a little bit longer. So Thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad that you're here. We're all glad that you're here and that you're okay.
Me too.
I get it. After having life-threatening health things happen, you're like, I hope I made it.
Yeah.
So April, anything else you want to chime in and add about what you've learned about yourself as a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. And also very glad that you're still here and love that we don't have to be patient. I think that's a great thing. One thing that I have learned over the past couple of years is that helping someone else execute something well trumps me executing anything flawlessly, because it is very important that we multiply leaders, that we are building a bench, that we are empowering other people to become greater. And when I am modeling to any team that I'm working with, building and empowering other people, then we are exponentially multiplying leaders across multiple organizations. And that's been a huge learning for me.
Yeah. Yeah, we realize that we can only do so much individually, which is why even a group like this exists, right? Because like the intent here is to be a multiplier. I mean, certainly Scott's just like the way you are, right, is showing up that way, and you draw people towards you that have a similar philosophy. So April, I think that's more important than ever as we recognize our capacities and our limitations and our priorities, that if we want to make all of those things still happen, we've got to find ways to multiply the things that are really the most meaningful and impactful.
Actually, a great book on that by Liz Weissman, who just wrote Impact Players, is called The Multipliers. So if anyone's interested in digging deeper into how to become a multiplier in your work, Liz Weissman is your gal.
Thanks. Appreciate that addition. We'll add it to the first Mentimeter. And if anyone else has anything else you want to contribute, feel free to drop in the chat. I mean, again, there's so much wisdom that can happen. Wisdom can happen from everybody. Each of you have experience and insight that can be a contribution to somebody else. So feel free, as you're hearing these questions that are asked, feel free to drop your own responses into the chat about something that you have experienced that has been an insight or a learning for you, a perspective that you've gotten about, how to move forward and how to navigate uncertainty and how to navigate stress and anxiety. So feel free to drop those in. And then I want to move things along. So thanks so much for contributing to that question. The next thing I want to invite you to reflect on is a moment of uncertainty in your own life. And by the way, everything we're talking about today, for anybody that's a journaler, any journalers here, I'm obsessed. I have a collection. I'm like, if my house were to burn down, that would be what I would take first, like all of my journals. And so, when we think about how we navigate uncertainty, that's one of the things that can help us best navigate hard things in the future, is when we look for the proof in our past. And we look for when's the time before that I got through a hard thing I wasn't sure how I was going to get through. So for this next question, LGO, I'm going to invite you to kick us off on this. I know you know a lot about this. You've already alluded to it. But thinking about a time when you went through a challenging experience of uncertainty that you weren't sure how you were going to get through it, but obviously you did because you're here. What did you do, and what strengths did you draw on to help you get through that thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories I can tell from being sick in the last year, or but I think I'll tell a story that's maybe a little more relatable to most people on the call, which is when I made the decision to sell my last business, and I didn't know what I was going to do next. I just knew I didn't want to be doing what I was doing anymore, and I knew that my team was going to be fine without me. In fact, I had created a firm that was doing what we did in a completely different way than it had ever been done. And we'd spawned all this competition. So I knew that they would be fine because the firm didn't need me out there being this iconoclastic, bombastic leader, like telling the world we need to do things differently, because they'd obviously caught on. It needed somebody who was geeked out about our work and really cared about the everyday quality, which I just, I didn't. I was like big picture. And my business partner was like, let me, figure out the everyday. And I knew it was time for me to go, but they didn't know. They weren't confident. They weren't sure. And so I realized that there are these lies that we tell ourselves every time we're in this uncertain place. And the first one is, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. It's not perfect, right? I didn't know if I was ready and it was perfect because I didn't know what I was going to do next. They didn't know if they were ready and they were perfect because they didn't know how to do my job. But the truth is, you're never ready. It's never perfect. And the only way to figure it out is one foot in front of the other, right? You have to keep going. The second lie is that we think failure is finale, right? Unless you're Jason, right? And you're on the field of battle, failure is not finale. It's fulcrum, right? It's the place where you learn and you grow and you iterate and you change. And, I'm sure April would say the same thing, right? Unless it's a life or death situation, failure is the place where we figure out what we actually care about and what works for us. And so all that uncertainty, it's part and parcel of the actual project. And then the last thing is that we say, if I really go out and I am the person I want to be, right? Like we were just talking about, if I'm impatient, if I embrace my ambition, if I really want to do this thing and just go for it, the people in my life aren't going to like me if I'm the me I really want to be. And I think that one is actually the truth, right? Because they might not. And there comes this moment when you're in this place of uncertainty that you have to decide, if I can't change the people around me, maybe I need to change the people around me, right? I got to get rid of them and have someone else. And so I think it's really important in these moments of uncertainty to think about your family, this combination of friends and family that are the ones who actually see you and know you. Because a lot of times you'll run into somebody in this moment of uncertainty and tell them about like what you're trying to do and what you're trying to get through. And they look at you with those giant eyes and they're like, oh my God, you can't do that. That's so scary. And what they mean is, I can't do that. I'm too scared. And that becomes this like cancer, especially in these moments when we're uncertain and we have doubt. It just becomes this like echo in our own head and we can't get past it. And so you have to remember that sometimes that comes out of a place of love, right? They love you. They don't want to see you get hurt. Maybe like me, you were 18 years old the last time you lived with your parents and you're like, I'm going to sell my business. And they're like, but you leave dirty socks on the living room floor. They don't know you. They haven't seen you in 30 years, right? Like you didn't have a full frontal lobe last time they were making a decision about whether you were capable of doing something. So maybe they love you. Maybe they're jealous, right? You got those people that judge their rise only by your stagnation or fall. Or maybe they're just really scared and they couldn't do it themselves. So, or maybe it threatens everything that they hold dear, right? Like if you're doing something in a non-traditional way, they're like, well, what does that mean about the way I do things? So I think reminding yourself in these moments of uncertainty that like, yeah, you're never going to be ready. It's never going to be perfect. Failure is where you learn and you grow. It's not finale, it's fulcrum. And sometimes you got to change the people around you if you actually want to go forward.
Yes, well said, and then well summarized. I don't even have to do a summary of what you just said because you just summarized it.
She's pro.
Hey, have you done this before? Right? Yeah, no, it's totally with you. I'm totally with you on that. Is that we have to essentially the root of what I'm hearing a lot of what you're saying is discernment, right?
Yes.
Really activating that sense of discernment at a higher level, and having essentially like a tougher skin. And just not allowing other people to affect us as much, which isn't always easy, but it's a choice to be affected.
Well, I don't know if you have to have a tougher skin necessarily. If there are people who you're around that always make you need to have a tougher choice and be more defensive and have a bigger armor, maybe they shouldn't be the people around you.
Yeah. And maybe I should clarify, maybe the tougher skin meaning being more thoughtful, like, because sometimes we're more afraid of disappointing other people than we are of disappointing ourselves.
I'm a big fan of burning bridges. It takes a long time for me to get there, but man, when I am there and I finally lit that match, done.
Decision made. And I think that's the courageous step. I think a lot of times there's hesitation to do that because of the fear. I think a lot of us will carry that fear of, I don't want to let them down. I don't want to disappoint them. So I will settle for disappointing myself and settling for something that I don't feel good about for the benefit of somebody else. That at the end of the day, why do I care so much about that and not care nearly enough about how I'm feeling and right? Yeah. So let's see, either Jason or April. Tell us a story about a time you went through a difficult thing and you weren't sure how you're going to get through. What strengths did you activate? What did you learn from that? How'd you get through it?
So,
I'm going to exercise patience and let April go first.
Oh man, Jason, that was just classy. I like it. So it's funny. I think for most of my adult life, I've really embraced uncertainty and I loved it. So I'm actually going to go back to a story when I was much younger, when I first went to go into the service. And I really wanted to be a broadcaster in the military. And you had to audition for that. And I epically failed that initial audition. And at that age, because you're 18, 19 years old, that felt like my entire life was then a failure. I was still on delayed entry, looking to go into the Air Force, but had a lot of fear that I wouldn't do well in the service if I wasn't doing this job that was this dream and would drive me to have the grit to get through basic training. Jason, you may not believe that there actually is grit that needs to happen to get through Air Force basic training, which I understand, but I was concerned. And I was just beside myself with what am I going to do next? And the greatest gift happened because the recruiting team had another person come through that wanted to become a broadcaster, and it had never happened before. And they came to me while I am in, just the valley of suck about what has happened to me, and said, look, we've got another guy. He wants to be a broadcaster. He needs help with the audition. It's a crazy process, but you did all of that right. They just hated you. Could you possibly help him? And what was amazing is, while it was difficult in one sense to, oh, I'm going to help you accomplish my dream, it was a gift. One, because what I have found from then on is that when I am in a place of uncertainty, it is never a mistake to look at how I can help, because that will take me to something that I am absolutely certain about, which is the value of helping other people and empowering them. And as an added bonus, this gentleman who happened to be a broadcaster who did make it and get in pointed out that there was a technical difficulty with my audition and that I should try it again because it wasn't my voice and I wouldn't fail if I did it. So because I chose to help someone to get out of uncertainty, I also ended up getting to have the dream that I had wanted since I was a little kid.
Super cool. And I think something that I like about what you shared is that when we feel stuck in uncertainty, sometimes we feel a little paralyzed about what do I do? And one of the most effective things that we can do to shift out of that state of stuckness is to think about, how can I help? How can I be of service? How can I be a contribution? Because that can get something moving, that can get some momentum going, that can get some motivation activated, that can activate a sense of purpose and feeling like we're making a difference. And that alone could then stir something else up as well. So
100%. Same thing with COVID, right? Where everyone was worried about what are you going to do next? In that case, I focused on helping businesses pivot. So I didn't even really think about my business at that point, but I also didn't have to. So for pretty much anyone, that can almost always be a way to get momentum, but you're also in service of others. So it's a win-win.
Yeah. I've never seen that happen where it hasn't eventually come back in some form, in some way, if it's done with genuine good intent to be helpful to somebody else, genuinely helpful to somebody else. So yeah, April, thanks for, I'm noticing a theme here. I'm noticing a theme in a lot of what you're sharing that tie back to being a go-giver. Let's see here. Jason, you moved on my screen.
I'm here.
Okay, there you are. Okay, great. Hi.
Hi.
Would love to hear your story.
Yeah, so two great stories. I think I know that challenges are subjective, What's hard for someone might not be hard for another person. I've got a buddy who's James Lawrence is the Iron Cowboy, so he's done 100 Ironman races in 100 consecutive days. And that's his heart. My heart is one Ironman race, right? So my heart is not his heart, and vice versa, right? And it's all about, to me, what those challenges are. And when I was young and immature and inexperienced, I attended United States Military Academy at West Point, and that was my heart. That was 4 years for me where it was every day was worse than the last. A very difficult experience, first time away from home, not having done anything like that before. And then later on in my life, I've started businesses. I've been to combat several times. I've got to become a ranger. I've become a Green Beret. I've written a book. I've done a lot of hard things. But whenever I face something that's really difficult, I always remind myself, at least I'm not at West Point. It can't possibly be as hard and as miserable as those 4 years. If when I was in combat, or like when I was in Ranger School and we haven't eaten in a long time, and it's 60 days of just living out in the woods. When I started to feel sorry for myself, I would literally say that, at least I'm not at West Point. And that would give me the courage and the motivation to continue on. But I was in combat, the same thing. We were in a firefight. I said, you know what? This isn't as bad as being at West Point, And so you can gain those experiences, or you can gain those experiences from learning from other people. I always say, well, my mother told me when I was young, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Now we say, show me your network and I'll show you your net worth. So we can learn from other people. We can look to the people around you. And how I was able to kind of get through those hard times in my life is, one, remind myself of what I've done before, and just sort of compare that with what I'm doing now. And then two, look to people that have gone through the same experiences, right? And lean on them and know that I'm not alone. I'm not flying solo here. Going to combat, you find, at least on my team, we all experience the same thing, the same firefights, the same tragic circumstances. Losing the same guys. And then when you deploy back home, you find that some guys are totally fine. They're okay with it. And some guys are just really affected mentally, for a long time. And I've always been curious about that. Why does it affect some guys and not others? And in my experiences, the guys that mentally prepared themselves before they went over there and had conversations with guys that had been deployed before and prepared themselves for what they're going to do, what they're going to see, what they're going to experience, that helped them. So when they were faced with that situation and they had to make a decision in the moment, they had already previously made that decision. They said, listen, if I'm ever faced with this, this is what I'm going to do. The guys that had a hard time are the guys that, when they're faced with that decision, they said, I've never made that decision. I don't know what I'm going to do. I have to make a decision right now. And it's almost as if their autonomy was taken from them. And I think whenever you take away someone's choice, their autonomy, their free agency, and it's taken away, you have a really hard time dealing with it. And so I'll just share those experiences with you.
Yeah, I think, thanks for sharing those. I think at the core of them, is this idea of sort of borrowing strength from your own and other people's stories and other people's ability to get through hard things and the times that you've gotten through hard things in the past. Again, looking for that proof of like, when have I gotten through something this or harder? When have I done this or harder in the past? And it's like, okay, if I got through that, I can get through this. If I got through that, I can get through this. If I got through that, I can get through this. And when we're having moments of feeling really overwhelmed by that, looking to other people's stories, like if we can't find it within our own, looking to other people's stories of who has been in a similar spot before and what did they do to get through it. So I remember when after this car accident happened 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I watched like the Soul Surfer documentary of Bethany Hamilton, right? And then I watched the Alex Smith 30 for 30. And I thought, well, geez, if that guy can like practically die of sepsis and still be like the NFL comeback player of the year, I think I'll figure this out, So it's sort of like, usually comparative suffering is not helpful, but sometimes it can give us perspective if we use it in an effective way. So that's what your share brought up for me.
Very, very true. I'll share another quick thing. Flo Groberg is the Medal of Honor recipient, a good friend of mine. He tackled a suicide bomber in Afghanistan and he got blown up, but he wasn't injured really that bad. He lost some of his calf and he couldn't run again like he used to, and he's feeling really sorry for himself. And he's yelling at the nurses and he's really angry and depressed. And finally, Travis Mills walked into his room at the hospital, and he's a quadruple amputee. So Travis walked in there on his prosthetics, and he was just like, "Why are you being a bitch, bro? Like, what do you have to complain about? Like, are you serious? Like, you're going to be upset about this?" And that kind of put it all into perspective for him. Like, listen, what do I have to complain about? Here's a guy who's lost all 4 of his appendages, his limbs, and he's happy and he's making a difference. And he's coming into this room to help me out. And being around guys like Flo and Leroy and Joey Jones and guys that have been blown up in combat, I always think to myself, you know what? I can tell you confidently, if I'd been blown up before I met these guys, I would not have handled it well. But if something were to happen to me in combat after having known these guys, I could handle it because they're my friends and I know how they did it, and I can do the same thing.
Yeah, perspective. These are, just watching the chat, by the way, some of the comments people are saying here. Don't forget to remember when my mentors taught me, remember tomorrow. When I think about how I want to be proud of myself tomorrow, I step up, right? It's like, what do you want to be able to say to your future self or look back on that self and say, I'm glad I did that, And then Eric says, I say on rough days now, at least I'm not with my old life with so-and-so carrier, it's that perspective if we can look back and say, at least. So those are great. And I invite everyone here to just reflect on those questions for yourself, to really think about what's a time, journal about that, set a timer for 10 minutes, grab a pen at some point today and jot down to yourself, when is the time I went through a difficult situation? How did I get through it? And what strengths did I draw on? Just doing that practice. That's it. There's a book called The Upside of Stress by Kelly McGonigal out of Stanford. Really, really great book if you struggle with stress, which a lot of folks do. And she writes about that practice, and it's actually an evidence-based practice to do that for 10 minutes at a time. That can really help to elevate your well-being, elevate your sense of resilience. elevate your sense of confidence and self-esteem. So this is a practice. Again, we're talking about this and inviting you to do it because it really works and it's something that can be effective. So we would encourage all of you to try that. So we're going to do now, we're going to move on to just a couple more questions. It's kind of just a hot topic right now that maybe if you've been on LinkedIn or been out in the world, you've seen this come up recently. A hot topic right now is how to handle return to office. I know there was a post that just went up about Apple and how there's a rebellion from their people about not wanting to go back into the office. So I'm curious what you've seen. We can easily focus on what we don't like, what doesn't work. That's not necessarily helpful. It's more helpful to find out, well, what is working and what could work. So I'm curious what any of you have seen or heard around, about what's working best when it comes to people first plans and policies around return to office. So April, we're going to kick this one over to you to kick us off. And while you're sharing and while Jason and LGO are sharing, we're going to invite you all into another Mentimeter question, which is dropped. Kathy's on it. It's dropped in the chat. And we'll invite you to chime in. What have you seen? What have you seen at your organization? What have you seen at organizations you've worked with? What have you heard about, read about that has been effective? So April, I'll come to you first. And while everyone's sharing, everyone here can click on that link and share your responses so we can capture all of your great ideas.
So great question. What I have seen the best companies do is not treat this like we're just going to return to what we were doing. It's the companies that think, okay, we are a new and different company because of the experiences we've had, where we are today and what we're looking to accomplish. What's the best way to do that now? So instead of making a hard-nosed policy that we're going to go back to the way that it was, it's really taking a focus on what they want to be and what the best way is to accomplish that, keeping in mind their goals and their mission, their clients and their people. And what I find really remarkable about that is how they tend to have had a little more of a collaborative approach. And they're also coming back to it and saying, these are our guidelines, and we're going to revisit these in a certain amount of time and see if this is really working for us. Because that not only gets buy-in from the people who are experiencing whatever this change is going to be, but it leaves their minds open to the idea that we're always looking to continuously improve, and we're always looking to reevaluate the way we do things with an eye to our people and our mission and how we can actually be most successful.
Yeah, just that nature of being iterative, right? Mm-hmm. Of like, be open to iteration. No one knows what they're doing right now. Like, when has this happened before? Besides never, right? We're all figuring it out. Yeah, well said. Continuous improvement, collaborative approach, being open to change, and being transparent. Other thing I heard when you say is being transparent with people about this is what our plan is, but give us feedback because you are helping us figure this out. It's not we are telling you how it is. You are helping us figure this out. That's what I heard. And
100%.
Yeah. Cool. All right. LGO, Jason.
I mean, I can go ahead. So we just finished a 3-year research project, actually, which we started in January of 2019, not knowing the pandemic was coming, obviously, or I would have bought stock in Zoom. But from 2019 all the way through present, we have a 67 question quiz that's online that asks people about what actually brings them meaning in their work. And it covers the 4 C's of consonants that are at the core of my book, Limitless: calling, connection, contribution, and control. Calling is like that thing that gets you up in the morning, the gravitational force, the business that you want to build, the leader who inspires you, the bottom line you want to grow, the family you want to nurture. Connection. Does my work actually matter? Do I see a direct line from what I'm doing today, every day, to the long-term calling that I wish to serve? Does what's in my inbox, my to-do list, like what's on my calendar, does it actually matter? Would anybody notice if I showed up tomorrow or not? Contribution. Does this work contribute to the lifestyle that I want to live? So am I allowed to manifest my values on a daily basis? Is it contributing to the kind of lifestyle I want to have through the money that I'm earning? Is it giving me the opportunity for the career trajectory that I'm looking for? So how does this work contribute to my life? And then control. Do I have any control over the things that I work on, the people that I work with, the prospects that I have, and like how much my hustle actually contributes to the money that I'm making? I expected in the pandemic for all of those things to be completely haywire and control to drop through the basement. And I was totally wrong. It turns out that of those 4 areas, calling, connection, contribution, and control, the only one that actually went up was control. And that seems kind of crazy, right? Except in the beginning of the pandemic, when leaders were like, oh shit, we need to do only what's mission critical. We need to do only what's important. We can't ask our people to do anything that's superfluous and stupid and sit in meetings for hours and hours and hours. All of a sudden, workers had an incredible amount of control over what work they did, where they did it, how they did it, and when they did it. And they liked that a lot. So as leaders are thinking about bringing their people back to work, what I would say is people like having some control. They like feeling like they have some kind of autonomy. And in fact, even before the pandemic, studies showed that workers are more likely to take jobs and promotions that give them autonomy and control than that give them lots of power. So think about your people and think about letting them continue to have the same amount of control or some semblance of control that allows them to actually have a seat at the table. There's tons, I mean, I've got, a 28-page report that you can get at heylgo.com/leader. And it's free, and there's 10 findings in it, but the findings are things like people want control. And what does control look like? It looks like, do I have a seat at the table? Does my boss actually care about my opinions? Am I going to actually be able to have some say in some big strategic decisions that are being made? Do I get some say over the metrics by which my work is actually being judged? Do I actually get to understand why this job, this task, this email, this meeting actually matters to our bottom line? Because a lot of times as leaders, we think that our people know what we're talking about, but in fact they don't. And even if we're super explicit with them, there's a study that showed that if you sit at a table and you tap out happy birthday, you're going to think the other person on the other side of the table absolutely is going to know what you're talking about. But it turns out 2.5% of people who hear that actually pick up happy birthday. So people don't even hear what we're saying when we're saying it explicitly. They need to actually have part in it. So go check out that leader report and give your people, as they're returning to work, some kind of control over the work, over their lives, over the community that you're trying to build.
Yeah, love that. Can you mention that or drop the link in the chat?
Sure.
There's an ask for that. That'd be awesome. And what you were sharing reminds me of, there's work by David Rock, who heads up the Neuro Leadership Institute. And one of the things that he talks about is these 5 things that people need to be engaged, which is a sense of, he calls it the SCARF model. So S standing for status, C standing for certainty, A, autonomy, R is relatedness or a sense of belonging and connection, and then F is fairness. And so when any of those things gets disrupted, we tend to either act out or withdraw. And that's what we're seeing people do right now, right? We're seeing people act out, like freak out, or we're seeing them totally check out, quiet quitting, ghosting, hiding, running away. We're seeing both of those dynamics play out. And it's typically because things that are really important to people, like what you're talking about, are being threatened in some way. And that's what people, all they know to do is like, I'm going to react because I don't like this. So thanks for bringing that into the conversation. Let's see, Jason, coming over to you to close out this question, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So just, if you have a question, just drop in the chat, I have a question, and then we will do our best to get to as many folks as we can, just a heads up. So Jason, coming over to you for this one. What have you seen? What have you heard?
The super relevant question. I'm glad you asked it. So I drive up and down the I-15, a major highway here in Utah, and you just see billboards from Brandon Hugel, office space available, like everything is empty. Like you can get it as cheap as you could possibly imagine. Because these employers are realizing you don't need office space, and the investors are saying, hey, listen, you're not going to spend my money on this office space that you don't need anymore. So I hear, I'm reading from Xenia, we're not asking to come to the office, we're setting quarterly summits. If we ask all teammates to visit headquarters and we all get together, and Stephanie's saying we have to give it as much notice as possible, we come back hybrid. And so that's exactly what I'm seeing from folks, is they're realizing we can't say no to any in-person meetings completely. For example, Traeger Grills, I met with them the other day, and they only have certain departments come in on certain days. Like, for example, their marketing team, they all come in on Thursday. That's it. They meet Thursday, they leave for the rest of the week, they come back the next Thursday. Other companies are saying, hey, once a month, we're going to get together and we're going to have a big kickoff meeting. We're going to have a keynote presenter. We're going to get everybody excited and charged up. I'm going to go over the agenda and the goals for the month. And then we're going to have these breakout sessions with each of your teams. And then when we're done, we're going to hang out, ask questions. We're going to eat some food, bond a little bit, and then you're going to go home and we'll see you again next month. So I'm seeing a lot of that, which is really interesting. So the bottom line is, I don't think you need office. Well, I guess it depends. Some people, I guess, would need it, to have better command and control and centralize their leadership. And others Others don't. I think most people don't need the WeWork space. You don't need an actual office space. You don't need it for the most part. And so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, a lot of flexibility in there, giving people that sense of choice and being very intentional. I'm hearing you say is so many organizations are just trying to go back to the way they did things. And it's like, we have to be intentional. Why are we gathering? There's a book by Priya Parker, the Art of Gathering. I would recommend anyone check out if you're looking into that, how to do this, right? The art of gathering, you know, how do we be more intentional about when and why we bring people together in person? And it can't just be, well, because that's what we used to do, right? It's like, let's be thoughtful about this and let's be intentional and let's even create a new reason why we're going to gather people and make it something compelling for them, as opposed to something that they're like, great, now I got to slog through an hour commute, which is what I love about working from home, is not having that. So really thinking through and asking your people, a question I love to ask is to say, hey, how might we be creative and innovative in how we foster connection and community at this organization in the midst of a hybrid environment? And then you ask your own people. It's like, don't leave it up to HR. Don't leave it up to like the C-suite to figure all that out. Ask your own people. Like what we're doing here is an example of crowdsourcing. Like there's already 20 examples of stuff that's come through on the Mentimeter that we're going to send out to all of you after this session. So thank you for your contributions. Know that they will be captured and sent out to everybody. But that's the power of crowdsourcing, right? You were saying, Jason, of like involving your people, like asking them what they want to do.
In fact, the asking people is such a huge finding from our study that I just want to give one word of warning to leaders. We know that good leaders are awesome, right? Good leaders develop people and they inspire people and people want to go work for them. Great. We know that bad leaders bleed out even the best workers. But what this study showed us is that even the best leaders, if you are an employee and you are working for one of the best leaders ever, but you feel like you don't have a relationship with them, they're going to bleed you out just as much of a bad leader will. So if you are a good leader and you do not have active relationships with your team, you're not talking to them, you're not asking for their opinion, not involving them, then you might as well be a bad leader. And what's worse, the vast majority of workers feel like they don't have a relationship with their leader. So when you do the getting back together, it shouldn't just be, let me sit here and watch you work so I can, know that you're working. It should be so that you are spending that time actively creating and building those relationships.
Exactly. Because it's like, hey, I could just do this at home. Like I could drink a beer at home, right? But it's like, why are we gathering? And being very explicit about this is why, and making sure that people feel the genuine nature they even want to, right? Some people are being forced back, and just like they were forced to happy hours before the pandemic, and they're like, why are we even doing this? I don't even like.
Yeah, we didn't like it then either,
right?
I ran my company that I ran for 15 years, and we had 30 staff, and they were literally all around the world, everywhere from, Seattle to Siberia and back. Well, I guess Seattle and Siberia are close, but if you went the other direction, Seattle to Siberia and back, literally we had people in Siberia and Seattle. And people would always say like, well, how do you judge the quality of your team's work? And I was like, by the quality of my team's work. It's not rocket science, right? Like you don't have to see somebody working. I can watch somebody do shit work.
Yeah.
Just watching them doesn't mean their work is good, right? But being super clear and super explicit. I was shocked when we had a virtual company at just how much we had to over communicate who we were, what meant quality, what the values were of being like a good quote unquote citizen of our company, that sort of putting it all in paper, being extremely explicit about what makes a good work product, and then always actively, pouring that Kool-Aid all the time. That's the job of the leader. It's not to babysit and watch your people. It's to make sure that you are instilling in them what actually matters and then praising them when they get there.
Yes, 100%. And that's a great kind of transition for us to invite folks to share maybe what questions you have. Let us know, what questions do you have? We'll have a little bit of bonus time. I forget what you call it, Scott. You call it like
do a little overtime. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna let our panel go in about 5-10 minutes. We'll stay on for a little overtime. Anybody that wants to chat about what we discussed today or wants to find out a little bit more about the Outlier project, we're happy to stay on, but we're gonna let our panel go. Our first question, and I'm going to tee up two right now. We're going to Florida to Alex Smith, and Alex, then we're going to shoot over to Baltimore to Eric Silverman.
My gosh, thank you so much. I know I'm in a right place where all these people are I'm connected to Rachel and stuff on LinkedIn, and Scott, you connect so many awesome people. Thank you, April. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Jason. My hands are like hurting. I could listen to you all day. I want to like just ask, just to follow up on what we've been talking about of how you create like more meaningful experiences in person, like some stories on what you've seen actually done. Because as someone that I was hired during the pandemic remotely. I didn't meet my manager in person, my VP, any of my teammates in person. I didn't meet my first teammate in person for a year into working. So it felt weird just knowing people over Slack and Zoom. It's like you don't really get to know people like this, like all of you. I can't wait to hopefully meet all of you in person one day. So I'm curious, like when I went and actually met people in person, we had a kind of a company networking event. It was like a quarterly business review, and we did the same kind of, we go to a bar and happy hours and did stuff, and you meet in person. I was just like, there's got to be more to this. Like I was just craving more. Maybe like before I wasn't craving like vulnerable maybe communication with my teammates as much. So my question is, what have you seen recently? Like if you could give some ideas on how you really, what you should be doing to be more creative and innovative, maybe vulnerable when you do actually come to in person. Because for me, I feel like it just is more impactful. It means more because of us being disconnected for so long. And that's for anybody, I guess, if you want to take it.
So, Alex, I want to make sure I understand your question. Are you talking from a leadership and company standpoint, or are you talking from the individual standpoint when they're coming together?
I think, yeah, from a company standpoint, like what can companies do in person? I don't know, creative ideas to really foster a more connected team and just more meaningful team than just kind of the
Normal go to
happy hour
kind of thing. So one of the things that I've seen work really well, both pre-pandemic and also after the pandemic, as things have been loosened and things like that, are more fun type team building events, not quite the kitschy hokey ones, but for example, like if you have a small enough team or you have several teams, you can break up like an escape room, things where people can work together to do something fun and they end up achieving a goal, but they also learn things about the different folks that they're involved with that they might not learn in a normal workday environment. You might not know that so and so is amazing at breaking code or is fantastic at reading a clue and seeing the nuance of it, things like that that open up other conversations afterwards. I think that doing a group activity, even if it is sports related or it is related to a game or things like that, before you then go do the happy hour at the bar or in lieu of it, allows people to discover things naturally about each other that open up new and different conversations, whether that's while they're together or when they're remote.
Thank you.
I would just add on to that a service project could be a great thing to do also. Going and doing like a Habitat for Humanity house, like doing something that's physical where you're working next to each other, but not staring each other in the eyes is a great way to have sort of side-by-side conversation that doesn't feel confrontational. And also what we learned from our study is that people so deeply want to be inspired by being part of a solution after they felt like they haven't been able to contribute in that way in the last couple of years.
I guess I'll add, I've always found that it's been successful when you take people off site. So you remove them from what they're comfortable with, remove them from the location that they're accustomed to, they're used to, take them somewhere different where they're a little bit uncomfortable, and then have somebody else come in and sort of with a different pair of eyes to set the stage for success and ask them different questions. For example, start out a lot of my executive coaching with large groups with, what's good in the hood? What's good in your neighborhood? Tell me something good, something positive that happened to you this last week. And people open up and they share experiences. One guy recently said that he performed the Heimlich maneuver on his best friend and saved his life. The other guy talks about how, he had his daughter, helped his daughter break up with this boyfriend that he really didn't like. Another guy was excited that his daughter just got into the University of Miami. And these are things that you normally wouldn't talk about and have conversations about at the workplace. And so you get to be vulnerable, drop your guard, bond with people, learn that they're deeper than what you suspected, and you drop your own guard, and then when you do that, you actually bond with people. The other thing is, we talk about values. In the beginning of the conversation, I said, when you know who you are, you turn the volume up. So who are you? For us, we try to define that through our values, what we value in life. And when we can help others determine what that is, they get emotional about that, but they care about that. It means something to them, means a lot to them. And when they can share that with other people, something that they're excited about, something they're passionate about, something that will inspire other people, we tend to bond because of that. So I think that's a great question, and it's incredibly important to nail that. It isn't the manner, the content of the communication, it's the manner in which you communicate, which is more important.
Super quick addition to that, having done, and this is facilitating. Hey, Alex, glad that you're here. Something that I found really helpful. I was just with a group about a week and a half ago doing a half-day retreat with their team, and they'd done one of those outdoor excursions where it's like, rock walls and trust falls and all that kind of stuff, and they really enjoyed doing that and being outside. But what we did is we sort of complemented that because we brought them through a series of questions and conversations, kind of like we're doing here today, that people really want to feel seen, heard, known, and understood. And if we just know surface things about each other, it's really hard to get to that place. And so what I found is that when we invite people, and I always say, share to your comfort level, but I also tell them that relationships move at the speed of vulnerability. So the extent to which you're willing and open to be vulnerable with another person is going to dictate the extent to which you are going to advance that relationship in some way. And being vulnerable doesn't mean airing out your dirty laundry and telling your deepest, darkest secrets. It might mean like sharing a moment of laughter together, or it might mean saying, I don't know, or I need help. And so what we did is we invited them. There's a tool I love to use, and there's so many out there, StrengthsFinder, DISC. I love a tool called VIA Character Strengths, the VIA Institute on Character. And one of the things that we did is we invited them to complete this assessment. And then I had all of them, talk about their strengths with each other and talk about a time where they've seen a strength come up and talk about what happens when they're not feeling at their best and how could they draw on one of their strengths. And we aggregated all of them and saw that the company strengths really aligned with the individual strengths collectively aligned with the company values. And it gave the CEO just this sense of validation that, man, I've really built an awesome team because the strengths that my people are showing up with actually align with the values that we say are meaningful to us as an organization. So genuinely facilitating people through a series of meaningful conversations around purpose, around learnings, around insights, around getting through difficult things, about resilience, facilitating those conversations can be so powerful at fostering meaningful and lasting connection.
And you know what a shortcut for that is joining the Outlier Project and coming to these events where Scott walks everyone through these incredible books with the authors and then talking about them together after. Just a suggestion.
Thank you for the plug.
This is how legends are made. This is how legends are made. This is how legends are made. This is how legends are made.